Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weeb from the Winnipeg Free Press. So together we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny Garbage Bag Day 1 Extravaganza Spectacular, whatever you want to call it. We're going to live up to the hype here. And you know what? It's not a traditional show, so let's throw tradition out of the window and get our main man, Ken, in the show right now. We're not going to throw out the tradition of playing the best music in the business, though, folks, so here comes Kenny. Ken, like a bear in hibernation, I know you are going to feast because there's going to be famine coming up after this. But before you get to that feast, it's been too long since I've done this. I'm not even going to wait for it to be called because I've delayed this for too long. So one last time, let's rock out for a third straight time and make this a Sean's Headband version of the Kenny and Renny Show. Here we go. Can't remember the name of the famous rock producer, Ken, who came up with the term the wall of sound in the way that he mixed his music. But that's how you could describe the beginning of this Kenny and Renny show with Tristan Rivers' awesome music to start this out. And we're going to follow it up with some awesome analysis, Ken. And I'm going to start here. We can get into the things that the players had said here today. But I think we need to set the table by giving our each own thesis of where this season went, why it ended up the way that it did. A lot of people know Renny at one time in his life was on his way to being a teacher, and I always get the hankering to hand out assignments. So here is your assignment, Ken Weeb. I need your verbal thesis on where you thought this season went. Now you've got your choice. You can let Renny go first and you can retort, or you can start this out. What would you like to choose, my friend?
Well, you chose the assignment, so you can go first.
Such a Ken Weeb move. Of course it was. Okay, let's listen. I too will be going into hibernation at some point after this. And I need as much opportunity to Barry Horowitz myself as I possibly can. For people who don't know, he was the wrestler who used to pat himself on the back. And my thesis is built on some of the things that I've said in the past, which I think were proven extremely true this season. You remember me saying about the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets get to their game faster than anybody else. And what did we see from the Jets? We see them come out of the gate with not even a mid-season form, maybe a mid to late season form as they start the season 15-1. You've also heard me say over and over again about the Winnipeg Jets that their strength is their structure, how they play it, their commitment to it, the way that they set up on the ice. It's the reason why, and I'll say it one last time, because I think there's signs in there that kind of show you why I was saying about Connor Hellebuyck that I did not think Connor Hellebuyck was the league's MVP, because Connor Hellebuyck is a function of the Winnipeg Jets, not the other way around. And I thought because the Winnipeg Jets were what made Connor Hellebuyck, put him in a situation where he could have the kind of season that he had this year, and made it so that he didn't have to be spectacular. The last time I'll say it, it's why he didn't have my vote as the MVP. So when we get into the idea of structure, why do teams I mean, it's a pretty obvious question, but if you've got a team that plays structure better than anyone else, what it can do is it can take you and it can make you the kind of team that could have a less superior roster. I guess the better way to put that would be an inferior roster, but be able to knock off superior rosters and do so again and again and again. And you will see the Winnipeg Jets spent a lot of time going out and trying to take what they had on their roster and skill their way through victories. And you saw that that didn't work. And you saw that that was an expiring game over the years. And you saw that it culminated in them missing the playoffs the last year before Rick Bowness showed up. And then Rick Bowness came in and started putting structure first with this team, not individual effort, not skill. Structure first. And this year has so far been the culmination of that, leading to the President's Trophy. The problem with structure, Ken, the problem with structure is that if your structure is your strength, if you can crack that structure, it becomes your weakness to a degree. So, in what we talked about, another way for me to pat myself on the back, I think that our analysis about the Blues series and Jim Montgomery and the effect that he would have on that series, people were told what was going to happen in that series before it happened. They watched it unfold in real time. Jim Montgomery, be an extremely brilliant tactician who found a way to expose the Winnipeg Jets structure in a way that most teams hadn't been able to during the regular season. And it culminated in blowout wins, 3 of them on home ice. And it culminated in the Winnipeg Jets requiring a miracle to get past them in Game 7 into the next round. And so that, to me, was what I was watching for heading into the playoffs, was that structure and if it would be challenged and how they would react. The good news for the Winnipeg Jets is that Scott Arniel, a head coach who had them the most structured team in the NHL, the most committed to it, the most effort put into it, responded well to those challenges. So when his structure was exposed at times by Jim Montgomery, what we saw in that series was him bouncing back and closing the holes that had been exposed in the structure and doing it sometimes game to game, but in my opinion, in Game 7 within game. Because the beginning of that game, I think, is owned by the St. Louis Blues. And by the end, there's no question that the Winnipeg Jets are the better team. I say it took a miracle for them to get by in Game 7, but by the end of Game 7, there was no doubt who the better of the two teams was. There was no doubt who was going to score and win in overtime. So we learn from this Winnipeg Jets team that they've got a coach who's not only able to get the most out of a team and its structure and a winning structure, but a coach that is able to address other teams pulling at the thread on the wool sweater and stopping that before you've got no sweater left. Something that they should be happy to look forward to in the future. We'll get into this more because the next garbage day that we cover is going to have Scott Arniel talking and Kevin Cheveldayoff talking. My take on the whole thing, if you want me to tell you why I think the Winnipeg Jets season ended in the second round, why I suggested before that round started that the Winnipeg Jets would be losing to the Dallas Stars. I had said before that if the Colorado Avalanche had got through, I believe that the Winnipeg Jets would have lost to the Colorado Avalanche as well. Here's the deal. As much as you want to say about structure takes you so far. Quick little story. If you've read Theo Fleury's book, there's a great part of it where he talks about being with the Calgary Flames and his coach, Daryl Sutter. Daryl Sutter, was it, Ken? I think I've got it right. Daryl Sutter is at one end and he's teaching the team the structure that they're going to play with. It's not a high-loaded, talent-laden roster, and he's teaching them the structure. What you're doing, you're trying to teach a roster, an inferior roster, how to beat superior rosters and do so through brilliant structure. And Theo Fleury's at the other end of the ice practicing. And Sutter comes over and says to him, "What's going on here? Are you too good to take part in the practice?" And Theo Fleury says, basically, "Yeah, I am. Here's the deal. What I do is not stand like an X or an O and move in this spot or that spot. I have things about me that are innate in who I am as a hockey player that I can do that these guys can't do, that you could never do, and maybe most importantly, that you can't teach." I've got the superstar factor where I can just take things above and beyond. And that's what makes me special. So you go over there and teach your soldiers where to stand on the battlefield. And I'm going to stay here and be special and do special things in a game to help put you over the top. Okay. The fact of the matter is, there's a limit, in my opinion, to how far you can take a structured roster. And at some point, all teams get structured. And then it just goes back to who's got the better roster. Okay. Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nick Ehlers, players like that had years upon years upon years where they tried to skill their way to cups, and they were definitely a limited team in that pursuit, right? They didn't make it that far in the playoffs. And here's the deal. This is nothing against those players. They are all super high-end players, but they're not Connor McDavid. They're not Nathan McKinnon. They're not Nikita Kucherov. They're not that level of player. So the Winnipeg Jets need the structure along with the high-end skill that those players have to take them over the top. But the long and the short of it, if I take a look at it, is, and some of the Jets talked about it today, they thought Dallas was bigger in the big moments of that series. It's easier to be bigger in the big moments when you've got more players that can be big in the big moments. The Winnipeg Jets roster did admirable in everything that it accomplished this year. You needed more talent than the Jets had. And this will be a conversation we have with about Kevin Cheveldayoff after this, the 2C role in the Mesnikov. You couldn't have asked more from that player in the first round. He way over achieved in the first round, but is Vladislav Nemesnikov going to do it again in the second, third, fourth round? The teams that win the playoffs have those players that do over and over and over and over again. So my take on this is the Winnipeg Jets went as far as they could. Supremely structured roster, high-end talent in those players, but not the kind of high-end that you get from the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and et cetera. Their structure took them as far as they could possibly go. There's a limitation to that. In the end, what it comes down to is the best rosters, unless they're not playing well or poorly coached, are the ones that go on and win. The Jets, it's as simple as this, folks. How's this for analysis? You just need more better players on your roster to fill in those holes, to carry that structure, but be the big game players at the moments you need them. I think it's as simple as that. The Winnipeg Jets, I think, have the formula. They need to build on their roster. They need to build more secondary scoring. They need to build big game players who are able to be big game players over and over and over again. And to me, it's why the Winnipeg Jets right now, we are talking about their season coming to an end and a team like the Dallas Stars moving on to the third round, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fair to say the Jets will be looking for a roster upgrade. I mean, these are the facts. 2018, the Jets were 7 wins away from their ultimate goal. This year, they were 10 wins away. We've spent a lot of this year comparing and contrasting the rosters. Which one is better? Some is better here. Some is not as good there. The defense didn't have Byfuglien, wasn't as deep. The depth up front is similar, but Connor Hellebuyck was obviously, more mature this time around, but didn't have some of the emotional scars in 2018 during that run. So there's a compare and contrast there. I think it's fair to say the Jets, if they want to win the Stanley Cup, they do need to upgrade the roster. Sean, I'm glad you brought up Edmonton. Your preseason pick. They weren't looking great going into the playoffs. Here's the thing about Edmonton. You used to rely a lot on 2 of the best players in the world, which is natural. The reason that they beat Vegas is simple, and it's the reason the Jets did not beat Dallas. The reason the Oilers beat Vegas is because their complementary players came through when the Stars were kept under wraps for the majority of that series at times by Vegas. And, even though the Dallas Stars had a line that basically didn't contribute at 5-on-5 in this series, Sean, their second line provided almost nothing. Matt Duchene 1 assist, Jamie Benn 1 assist. The Jets didn't get enough complementary scoring. And again, of course, they dealt with some ridiculous, terrible tragedy in Game 6, but the overall body of work, it's an even series outside of special teams. 7-3 was the final tally on the special team side of things. That +4 was enough to give the Dallas Stars a 4-2 series win. Now, that's not the only reason that they won the series, but it is a big separator. And, for me, we talked about this at the end of Game 6, Sean. Right now, the Dallas Stars have 2 number 1 defensemen when Miro Heiskanen is healthy and Thomas Harley is healthy, as he was and was down the stretch. So, again, injuries are obviously part of it, but every team has injuries, Sean. We saw it during that cup run for the Colorado Avalanche. They had to play without Nazem Kadri at times. They had to play without a bunch of their different players at different times. So, yes, of course, with the benefit, we'll look back at one time and say, oh man, what if Ehlers didn't bump into the linesman in game 80? Of course, that may have made a difference. It may have meant that the Jets didn't need to go 7 with St. Louis. Gabe Vilardi, gave incredible effort, but he never got back to the speed he was rolling at when he was looking like a 35 plus goal scorer and, a top line player. So overall, the Stars, dug a little deeper. They've had, we've talked about scar tissue a ton going into this series. Well, the Stars have got a little more scar tissue and a little more experience than the Jets had in this series. They were a little bit better. They were a little bit better between the pipes. They were a little bit better at defending. They were a little bit better up front, and they were substantially better on special teams. So, as close as the series was, it's interesting, right? The perspective lens is so interesting. And, again, I'm not going to just lean on what the players said, but I thought it was pretty telling, Sean. There's a lot of positivity in that room for sure. But one of the players who has grown into a real leadership role on this team is Kyle Connor. And Sean, Kyle Connor used the word failure to describe the season, which I was a little bit surprised by, but I shouldn't be surprised, because if the ultimate goal is 16 wins, falling 10 short is tough. And Kyle's a guy who's been here a long, long time. And, he is definitely not down in the dumps about it. He definitely sees their roster being closer to being a Stanley Cup winner, not just a contender. But he also knows the facts are this core group is not getting younger. This is going to be year 2 of 7 for Hellebuyck and Scheifele. And he knows that the clock is ticking. So I love that level of honesty from Kyle. And again, that's not to say that the positivity from the other players is not welcome too. Of course it's welcome. They have to notice. They did take steps. They did take important steps forward. This was not a first round ouster with, knowing that they were nowhere close. But this is what I've been telling people that have been asking. To get within 10 wins is impressive, but those next 10 wins, Sean, are tougher than the first 6 that they accumulated this time around. So, I think the Jets are well coached. I think their roster is well constructed, but it has to be enhanced if they want to win the Stanley Cup. That's just, these are the facts. I think that we look around at the 4 teams that are still playing. You could say the Jets roster stacks up okay against them, but let's just put it this way. The defending Stanley Cup champions, Sean, currently have a third line that includes Anton Lundell, Brad Marchand, and A2 Luostarinen.
Yeah.
Is the Jets' third line as good as that line right now? They're not. They had a great year. The Jets had a great their third line had a very good year for a long, long time. If you're stacking them side by side, right now, Brad Marchand had the most points in the series at 37 years old as a guy who was traded at the deadline. Adam Lowry had a very solid playoff, and Mason Appleton had 7 assists. That was admirable for him. But Florida's third line is a little bit deeper than the Jets right now. So, and again, the second line needs further improvement. And that's going to be tough to do without knowing what Nikolai Ehlers' plans are. And both of you and I think, are feeling the same way about this. Ehlers has loved his time here, but I don't expect him to be back with the Jets. Now, could something change in the negotiations? Of course it could. But I think it's more likely that Nikolai Ehlers chooses to go to a team where he can be a first-line player.
I think that's exactly what happens. We'll dig a little bit more into that, although it may be hard. Maybe we should do that. Let's revisit that when we're talking about the general manager in this situation. I will just say this quickly. Chris, Jets fan, says the Jets need to rest more players before playoffs and spend less time chasing number 1, in my opinion. Easy to say that. Not so easy when the Dallas Stars are bearing down on you, and if they catch you, your first round opponent is the Colorado Avalanche. Look, the Jets again, needed a miracle to get out of the first round against the St. Louis Blues, we're probably talking about another first round exit and the frustrations that go with that. We are talking about that if there's not a miracle, but we're also probably talking about that if the Winnipeg Jets run into the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. That's my opinion anyway. And I think my opinion should carry some weight, at least in the fact that I was the one who said that the Dallas Stars were going to win this series, and it ends up going in that direction. So it's easy to say, let's take our foot off the gas pedal, and wherever we land, we land. But when the difference between that is a number 8 seed that's had to, say what you want about the St. Louis Blues, they had to pedal to the metal this season from Four Nations on just to get over the playoff line, and were the last team to get in there. The Colorado Avalanche were an extremely capable team that took the Dallas Stars that you just lost to Game 7 and had to lose on a miracle of that series own in order for them to fall out in that first situation. So Chris, Jets fan, it's easy to say that. It's a little bit harder in that moment to be like, yeah, sure, let's just take the gas pedal off and run into the Colorado Avalanche and that stacked roster that they had in that situation. Ken, let's turn it and get to some of the players and the conversations that we had there. And let's start with Luke Schenn. I'll just give a couple quick ones. We found out that it was game 3 or game 2 that he got. Game 2 in the third period. He got cracked ribs. Excellent story to tell. We know there was a cone of silence over him and Brayden Schenn that ended when they were shaking hands, and he told him that he'd broke his ribs, and Brayden Schenn told him he had a similar injury, pointed right in the exact same spot. Funny part about that conversation we were having afterwards, Ken was in on this as well, talking with Luke. Brayden, I said, why is Brayden playing in the World Championships if he's got an injury, which we're assuming is broken ribs, Ken, in that situation, or maybe dislocated ribs or something?
Correct.
Well, extremely, extremely painful. He got a call from Sidney Crosby, a good buddy, and said he was coming. And this is the way it goes, folks. When Captain Canada comes calling, you put on your cape and you fly beside him. You don't ask questions about it. And that's what Brayden Schenn, the Warriors,
parents are tight. That's also part of it.
There you go. Parents are tight as well. You don't say no to mom and dad's friends. Yeah, that's for sure. Regardless, Ken, your takeaways from Brayden Schenn's conversation on the way out the door.
Yeah, well, quickly, this is what we said on this program. I mean, and there were some whispers going around that this is the first time the Jets have been healthy when Luke Schenn was sat down in round 2 for Colin Miller. And I was quite quick to assess that I'm not 100% sure that Luke was healthy, a healthy scratch, and so he wasn't. I obviously tried to play through it as best he could, and in a couple of those games, Colin Miller got the call, or at least one of them. So, good on him for battling through. No surprise. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't lack commitment. I mean, this guy loves the game, and he was playing through it and did the best that he could. And, no surprise. I mean, the funny part of that, Sean, too, not only did Brayden and Luke keep the rib injuries from one another, so did Dad.
Yeah.
Luke saying Dad didn't tell either one about the other guy's injury, which I found quite humorous, and included it in our notebook here in the paper going up shortly. But yeah, I mean, I thought that Luke handled things really well. I mean, I asked him about taking the next step, and again, he echoed the words that Paul Maurice said at the exit interviews in 2018, Sean. As many steps forward as the Jets have taken, you don't automatically get to start at game 13 of the playoffs next year. You don't automatically get into the playoffs. You don't automatically get out of the first round. You don't automatically get deep in a round 2 scenario where you may be able to force a game 7 and maybe get to the conference final for the first time since 2018. You start at ground zero. Your foundation is much firmer for sure, but this isn't just to the earlier point that you put up from Chris. I mean, this isn't just you automatically get to do this and then coast through the regular season. Other teams are able to coast because they have a longer track record of being able to crank it up. The Jets don't have that track record yet. They took a big step forward for sure. Jets can't go into cruise control mode. And I totally disagree with Chris. Them chasing first place and being chased by Dallas was good for the Jets. if they didn't get chased by them, they probably lose in the first round to St. Louis based on how that series was going. So, can they adjust a few things and maybe get some guys a little bit of extra breathing room down the stretch? Maybe. But learning how to win and closing out a division banner, B, a President's Trophy, that is valuable for the Jets, not just to put up the banners up in the arena and to make the fans feel good. It's important for them to be able to take those steps forward in the playoffs, which they did, but they still have further steps to take. And that goes back to what we talked about roster improvements down the stretch here, Sean. But in terms of Schenn, I like his perspective. He waxed poetic. I mean, this is a guy who's played for several high-end organizations. He knows how high-end organizations work. And he wasn't just simply spouting off about how great the Jets treat their players or how, what they're doing in order to make life better for them and their families and all of those things because he has to. He shared it because he felt it was important to share. And this is a guy with perspective. He knows how other teams operate and maybe where some of them excel and where some of them maybe aren't up to par on certain avenues. So that's sort of what I took away from what he had to say. I mean, this is a guy who's really hungry. I think he's going to be excited to have his family living here. We know his kids are into hockey. I think he's excited, although it was super fun for him. I mean, they had a group of guys in Nashville this year with Ryan O'Reilly and Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos, where all of them had kids around the same age that played on the same team. But I think he's going to be super excited to have his kids have the opportunity to play hockey in a Canadian market in minor hockey. So, again, I think he's going to be a valuable piece of the puzzle moving forward. And, that physical edge is something that the Jets are going to continue to need going forward.
Just a couple things on Luke Schenn. First off, T. Willis says cracked ribs are just a pain tolerance thing. Speaking as a player who broke his wrist and taped his hand to his stick and continued playing and was capable of playing through that kind of pain, I also broke ribs playing hockey. That was not very easy to play through. Never mind sleep through. And I guess maybe cracked ribs can be, different reactions in different areas based on where you crack them. But coughing,
it's hard to breathe. Basically,
it's hard to do everything.
Hard to skate
in that situation. So it's fairly easy from the outside. This kind of reminds me of what was it? Who was the player who had the spleen issue, ruptured spleen, and had played through that? Or I mean, even I as someone who had a hernia when former captain, first captain, when they came back, Andrew Ladd played through the playoffs with a sports hernia. I mean, it's easy to say this is a pain tolerance thing. People get the idea of that, and people have done certain things before. This just being broken ribs and sloughing it off as a pain tolerance thing, that's some mighty pain tolerance, I will say. Just the other things that stood out to me, the recognition of the love and the family atmosphere that this team has created, and we'll get into it with some of the players. This will be a recurring theme. Hard to get players to come to the Winnipeg Jets, but boy, oh boy, once they're here, they are sure turning into a place that no one wants to leave, as evidenced by, Brandon Tanev, the comments that he made, Hayden Fleury, especially Mason Appleton. You've had it proved in the past by obviously Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, Nino Niederreiter, Vladislav Nemesnikov, go up and down the list, Pionk, over and over again. The Winnipeg Jets are really starting, in my opinion, to get a reputation of being a place that, hey, it may be hard to come here, but once you come here, it's hard to leave. And I think a guy who's been in as many organizations, to your point, as Luke Schenn has been, and knows what good organizations look like, has a very good understanding of what makes the Winnipeg Jets and the city of Winnipeg a special place to play. Let's move on, and let's move to Brandon Tanev. I mentioned him quickly. What are your stands out from his year-ender?
Yeah, I mean, he gave what we thought. I mean, a little bit of the Tasmanian devil attitude. I mean, obviously we thought there would be that, we'd seen the moments in the past where Brandon finds himself a shorthanded breakaway or bangs one home. I mean, his offensive numbers weren't there. No points in the playoffs. So, I mean, again, he didn't supply that secondary scoring you thought you might get from Brandon Tanev, but you got a lot of high energy in those, 13 games, 18 PIMs. penalty killing. But again, the penalty, I'm not saying it was when he was on the ice necessarily, but the penalty killing needs further improvement. Great effort. And again, another guy who loved being here, kind of took a little stroll down memory lane, talking about joining the Jets out of Providence College, where he was the captain, had some other options. I remember being in the stands in Anaheim when he signed Sean. His dad was there and is so proud, and like to see what he's kind of grown into as a player. I mean, it's impressive to see, but I mean, Brandon's an incredible worker bee. It'll be interesting to see what is, again, I think that, as hard as he is as a worker, I think, in order for Brandon to be considering to be sticking around, he's probably going to have to take a little bit of a pay cut. Could I see him as a fourth line player here? Sure. But yeah, man, he's a guy who's, we'll see what happens with him. Again, we know he's close with his brother, Chris. I mean, could you see him going to Toronto as a fourth line player, adding a little bit more edge to that roster? Sure. So we'll see how that unfolds. But again, another guy who loved being here, really enjoyed himself being back and feeling that energy of a whiteout after departing. Again, he went to a great hockey market too, going to Pittsburgh originally, and then got to see what was going on in Seattle and all those things. So, I mean, again, he's had an interesting ride. Does it extend with the Jets? I'm not 100% sure. I know that they value him as a person. They value what he brings to the rink, but again, you can't bring back everybody, and Brandon will be a UFA, so some of this will be his choice also.
I want to couch this by saying at the beginning, in the theory that the Winnipeg Jets, and I think a theory that probably was like, I mean, if I could come close to proving it as you possibly can, that the Winnipeg Jets, the most structured team, that's what makes them their strength. The more time you spend within that system, the better that team is. I remember, or the better that contribution is by that player into that system. I remember when they picked up Brandon Tanev, to me, it was like, okay, it's depth, but to me, it was, I know a lot of people were really excited. He's a former player, broke in. He's got the eyeball thing going on, people like that. He stands out in the league for that reason. And I know that people love the idea of bringing former Jets back. That move, not that it didn't make sense. It made sense, and exactly what he brings, and any team can use that. But it didn't make sense to me in the idea that it was just more of what they already had. And I personally think, in retrospect, Ken, and I questioned this as we moved on in the playoffs, I don't know that there was a huge above replacement factor to Brandon Tanev when it came to a player like Rasmus Kupari. I don't know that there was a huge above replacement angle to him going in for David Gustafsson. And to be quite honest, I don't even know that there was that huge of a above replacement to him going in ahead of Jared Anderson-Dolan. Now, this is not to say anything about Brandon Tanev. I think Brandon Tanev did what Brandon Tanev does really well. Energy, like you said, Tasmanian Devil. He's going to catch a piece of you. He's going to be up in your face. He's going to use his speed to disrupt. But I think that, what we saw from David Gustafsson in his time in the playoffs was a guy who found his way to contribute and get on the scoreboard, something that he has done over and over and over again, that I'm actually surprised the Jets have not tried to plumb more. Like, I honestly don't know what more David Gustafsson can have given the Winnipeg Jets time and time again in his additions. And I know that Kupari doesn't play as heavy a game, but I would argue that almost he plays within the Jets structure a more disruptive game than Brandon Tanev does. So it was surprising for me to have that move made for that reason. Jared Anderson-Dolan found a way to get onto the score sheet in that first series, which to me, I think makes Brandon Tanev a candidate to not return to the Winnipeg Jets again, because Brandon Tanev has been a guy who was very much appreciated when he went to Pittsburgh, very much appreciated when he went to Seattle. This is a player who's going to go wherever he goes and likely be a fan favorite. So Winnipeg is not a place for a player like, I would suggest, maybe a Mason Appleton, who really, when he wasn't a Winnipeg Jet, I don't know that he was much of anything. He's just fit really, really well in with the Winnipeg Jets. And clearly a guy like Vladislav Nemesnikov has found his home. And even a guy like Nino Niederreiter has locked in more with the Winnipeg Jets than he did with the vast majority of other teams that he's been on. for that reason, I think that Brandon Tanev, for the reasons I listed, that I don't know that the above replacement factor that was that much greater. I think that another team is going to be able to find more value and a higher contract to offer him, that the Winnipeg Jets will look at it and say, we don't need to go that high, because to be quite honest, we don't know that what he brings is that much higher than guys that we already have here and can use. I think we've seen Brandon Tanev in his second go around with the Winnipeg Jets play his last game in his second go around with the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, like you said, Anderson Dolan's already under contract for next year. Similar type of player, maybe not quite as fast. But he was disruptive when he got in, for sure. Again, I think it's more likely that he will move on also.
Yes. Let's move, because I just brought him up and talked about him. Mason Appleton, who we had a little bit of a conversation, clearly a close guy with Mark Scheifele and Brad Scheifele, touched a little bit on, like trying to nurse your friend through the pain that he's feeling. He also addressed the pain that he feels in not scoring on that open net that a lot of fans have really derided him over, fair or unfair. Explained that he just, because the puck was on its side, he was not able to get on that puck what he wanted to get on that. In a moment like that, with the game on your stick, a lot of people will say, you're a pro, it's your job, get it done. Don't get it done, then you get rode for it. Easy to say that, not so easy to handle a rolling puck. I'm not giving him an excuse. Do I think that puck is in the back of the net if it's Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl or Mark Scheifele or Kyle Connor? I do. Mason Appleton is who he is, and right now he's a player, who's going to replay that play over in his nightmares over and over and over again. Also a player who's a UFA. Ken, where do you see him? You feel free to weigh in on some of the things that he said about missing that open net, but feel free to dovetail that nicely into where you think his future lies.
Yeah, you know what? First of all, I like the fact that Mason brought it up unprompted. He was probably going to get asked about it, and he probably knows he was going to get asked about it. And I applaud him for, attacking it. And then when it was, brought up for a little follow-up, again, you can tell, everyone in the chat room saying that's a shot 90% of beer leaguers make. I mean, I've seen some of you in beer league. I don't think that 90% of you make that shot, but it's an easier one to make from your couch. And I'm going to tell you this, nobody feels worse about it than Mason Appleton. No amount of derision on X or otherwise is going to make him feel less badly about it. No one feels feels worse about it than he does. He understands the ramifications of not scoring on that play. I mean, was he trying to miss? Of course not. I mean, did he hit it a little bit earlier than he wanted to? Maybe, but it's one play in a series. And, for all the folks saying the Jets aren't deep enough, I mean, Mason Appleton tied for third in points in the playoffs. And it's not just measured by points. And I get it. Some people don't like the usage. I get it. And that's fine to say, but Mason Appleton brings a lot to the table. Could you argue, is there an upgrade available? You bet, maybe. But Mason Appleton has given everything that he could give. He's a very competent checking line player who is in double digits in points and goals this year. His production dipped a bit. I think the best version of Mason Appleton has been on display with the Jets, 7.5 plus or almost 7.5 of his 8 years in the NHL. But what we've talked about all the time, if you're looking for upgrades, I mean, maybe Mason Appleton, same thing that you said about Tanev, Sean, and again, they're not the same player. I think Mason Appleton will have a chance to maybe make more money elsewhere, given some of that checking line ability. And, I've said this before. I mean, Alex Iafallo extending, I think Alex Iafallo is someone that has played in the top six. So I think that there's an opportunity that he could potentially be playing with Lowry at some point. Again, and depending what happens in the offseason, Adam Lowry could be the second line center, depending on where things shake down with a few other things as well. But Mason Appleton gets a lot of heat. Again, some people can say what they want, and everyone is saying what they want regardless. I think he's been a guy who's given a lot to this community, and Sean, he has embraced this community. wearing a Winnipeg hat today was not an accident for Mason Appleton, and it wasn't a bargaining tool. This is a guy who loves this community. He was a 6th-round draft pick, and Sean, if you're a 6th-round draft pick and you played 8 years in the NHL, you've done a damn good job of carving a career for yourself. I remember talking to Appleton at that first development camp. He is a he's a guy who plays hard, and has given everything that he could to this organization. And, no matter what happens to him, he's going to be someone that I think there is a vocal minority that is shouting out and saying that, they don't appreciate his game as much. But this guy's given a lot to the organization, and, he will be thanked for it if he's not returning, and we'll see what happens here when free agency hits. But again, I think that, he was bumped to the 4th line at one point during these playoffs, and, was that a sign of what is to come? I mean, we'll see. But again, I think that Mason Appleton is a guy who skates well. He's a smart player. He's given a lot to the organization. And like I said, if he moves along, then, he'll be thanked for his service. And he's a guy who will be missed because he's grown into a part of the leadership group. He's a very accountable person. And I applaud him for those times that he shared his thoughts with us over the years, if he is moving on.
Let me close out on Appleton. He's a player that I think if the Winnipeg Jets, to our point that we made at the beginning of the show, that I think the Jets took this roster as far as they could go, which means they need a better roster if they want to go further. One of the things I think that you have to do is you have to find a way to take that 3rd line that is one of the most ferocious checking lines in the league and find a way to add more scoring to it. And the one thing that I've seen with Mason Appleton is when I talk about the Winnipeg Jets being at, 90% mid to late season form at the start of the season, what I would have to do is I would take the guys or the production that goes really, really high at the beginning of the season that tails off. What that tells me is the Jets are at a 9 and a lot of other teams are at a 3 and a 4. And if you are getting the vast majority of your points when your team is playing at a super high level and everyone else is just starting out, and then those points tail off, what that tells me is that you are capable of producing only when your team has a distinct competitive advantage that disappears as the season wears on and as you go into the playoffs. So if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you need to up your roster, one of the things you need to do, and boy, oh boy, this is Rennie's version of the break up the 3rd line, is you need to find ways, especially since you started exploring, ways that to cover off injuries in the playoffs, of Adam Lowry getting with players like Nick Ehlers and Cole Perfetti and other players like that and more into a scoring role. If that's the case, then you need to find more scoring wingers. So what the Jets need to be looking for is someone who can play defense like Mason Appleton, but can produce at a higher level than Mason Appleton. And I think that definitely puts Mason Appleton in danger. As much as he sounds like he wants to stay a Winnipeg Jet, I don't know how much the Winnipeg, like at some point, if you think you need to change the philosophy slightly to get over the hump, I think that makes a guy like Mason Appleton a prime candidate to be replaced on the way to adding the scoring and the high-end skill that I think you believe, Ken, I think a lot of people believe the Winnipeg Jets need to start adding to make them a more capable team in the playoffs. I wanted to touch on just a couple things here and hand out some awards here. Time for Fishing. I thought he was joking because he says put Jeff Skinner in net and no way the Jets make the playoffs. I thought he was just joking and making fun of someone who'd said something about it. But he clearly, because I've read some of his other things, and he's trying to say that the Winnipeg Jets wouldn't have made the playoffs without Connor Hellebuyck. This is just an all-time terrible take. He does mean Stu Skinner here. He does think that the Winnipeg Jets are nothing without Connor Hellebuyck, when the Winnipeg Jets helped pull Connor Hellebuyck through a first-round series when he was struggling, and he admitted to doing so. This is an all-time bad take and an all-time hot take by Time for Fishing, which means it's time to pass out the Flame and Comfort Award for the K&R Hot Take, brought to you by Flame and Comfort, Manitoba's premier supplier of fireplaces, wood stoves, inserts, and everything hearth-related. After 50 years heating up your world, Flame and Comfort is soon moving. You'll find it will be one of the most impressive showrooms in Western Canada. You don't need your hot takes to keep that warm feeling inside, folks. Visit Flame and Comfort. They will take care of it for you. I mean, you're talking about a guy who had 9 shutouts this year, 5 of them that looked like snooze fests for him, and you're thinking that was required, that goaltender, to get to the... I'm not saying he's not a great goaltender, but boy, oh boy, if there's one thing that I think is the most lazy, tired take in the entire NHL, it is that the Winnipeg Jets, the best defensive team in the league the last couple of years, are entirely dependent on Connor Hellebuyck. That is a bad one. That's a bad one. Partisan Paul with a great take, though, says the problems with the bottom 6 is none of them can be relied on to score. Even Nino dried up. This is a really good take, and maybe the wake-up call that the Winnipeg Jets need. And, of course, that means it's time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake-up call at 204-981-6289, the guy you want down at your place for all your roofing, siding, and exterior needs. Talked with him today. We're going to set up a coffee when I get back from the 3rd and 4th round because it's been too long. Also, time to give Pristine Roofing a call directly. If you can't get a hold of North End Rick, you can call Pristine Roofing at 204-237-7663 so you can give your home the pristine roofing and siding wake-up call. If your home needs it, you should do it, and you'll be glad you did. Ken, give Sweet Lou a shout-out while we're at it.
You bet. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin at Roll LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's LOU at LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including this podcast.
Okay. I'll touch on Nemesnikov. You can add to it if you want. Because Vladdy Nemesnikov, great guy, really nice guy. He's really perfected the art of not saying much at all when it comes to interviews. So there's not necessarily a lot to hang things on. I'll just say this, and I said it off the top of the show. Winnipeg Jets aren't in the second round if it's not for Vladislav Nemesnikov. Vladislav Nemesnikov is an example of giving everything that he possibly could have to get this team to where it got. He's an example of squeezing all the juice out of the orange on your way to getting as much orange juice as you possibly could have outside of shaving off the rind in to add volume to your glass of orange juice. Great job, but again, similar to Mason Appleton, a player that the Jets are going to have to find a way to move down the lineup if they want to be able to get further than they need to. Again, give them all the credit in the world. They are not in the second round if it's not for Vladislav Nemesnikov. But I can tell you this, if you gave true serum to the Winnipeg Jets organization, their management group, they would be the first person to tell you that not only have they tried vigorously to upgrade at the 2C and did so last year in the exact same situation. As much as they appreciate him, those efforts have been ongoing and they will continue. Ken, anything to add to Vladislav Nemesnikov?
No, I think you nailed it. And again, the Jets are a better team if Vlad Nemesnikov is on the 3rd or the 4th line. I mean, these are also facts. The guy plays as hard as he can. He can move up in the lineup when you need him to. But, the level of production wasn't quite there in the second round. And, again, like you said, they don't get there without Perfetti and Nemesnikov's performance in the first round late in the series. But they needed more from the second line. And again, Sean, if the Jets are potentially losing Ehlers on the second line, that job of making the second line better is not a one-man job. It's a 2-player job. So that's a big task for the offseason. We'll get more into that.
Huge. Yeah, that's tomorrow. That's Thursday. Just so people...
And Ryan C. agreed. I think that Vlad Nemesnikov could easily be on the wing with Adam. Oh, sorry. You had it and I didn't.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't put it up. Sorry.
Okay. No worries.
Nemesnikov perfect for the third line. And honestly, that's where he started when he came here, Sean. I remember his first game was against the Oilers. He played on the wing with Lowry, and he had a goal and an assist, I think, and shut down McDavid. So I could easily see that being something that we see moving forward here. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Quickly, I just wanted to remind people, Renny, I actually leave tomorrow, so I won't be around for garbage bag day number 2 because I leave early tomorrow morning to cover the game tomorrow night game 1 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars. Just so folks know the good looks. The good looks from Vittorio Rossi will continue on throughout the duration of the playoffs, because I'm going to the Cup final. And if you find yourself at home seeing Renny on TV and thinking, yeah, you know what? There's not a lot he can do about that face, but boy, oh boy, the suits sure look good. If you've got the kind of face that Renny has that you can't pull a lot off, the boys of Vittorio Rossi will help you pull it off. All you got to do is head down there, walk in, loudly proclaim Kenny and Renny sent you, ask for Frankie and the boys, and they will do you up right. Let's touch on Fleury. The thing that stood out to me most, Ken, was his just almost outright. I was almost thinking if I was his agent, he'd be like, hold it back, Hayden, hold it back, because Hayden sounded extremely, extremely keen on returning to the Winnipeg Jets, almost to the point that he would take away a little bit of leverage in contract talks. What did you take away from his availability?
Yeah, having talked with Hayden over the course of the year a few times, Sean, this is a Saskatchewan guy who loves playing in the city. He brought it up again, playing in a hockey market. Something he loved doing. I think this was a roller coaster season for him, Sean. I mean, he came into the season probably as the 8th defenseman, but with the early injuries to Heinola and Stanley, he found himself playing regularly early. Went into the top 4 when Dylan Sandberg broke his foot on the Steven Stamkos one-timer. Was playing pretty well. I mean, the minutes were probably a little at one point, Sean, this year, this player went from being the number 8 or 9 guy on the depth chart to playing 3-on-3 overtime. So do you think he wants to stick around? Damn right he does. And you can understand why. This guy, season last year ended in a ridiculously unlucky injury running into the linesman, similar to Ehlers, but never lost belief in himself. He's a very grounded individual. He's been through lots of ups and downs as a high draft pick, and I think he's a great fit here. I think that people know my feelings who watch the show. The receipts are laid out. I think that Hayden Fleury should be re-signed. I think Hayden Fleury will be a top 6 player for the Winnipeg Jets next season if he re-signs. But again, they've got to get something done. But this is the kind of guy that you want to have around. This guy loves the game. He's a prairie guy. He wants to raise his family here. And he's a 6-foot guy that can skate and is a big, strong guy. I mean, can play physically also. So,
question for you, Ken: did they put themselves in a bad spot by not playing enough of him in the regular season to carry basically a regular role on the team, and then understand what he looks like if they decide to move forward with him playing in that third pairing like you're talking about, and seeing what an entire season of hockey does to him?
Well, I mean, you didn't ask this way, but would I have wanted to see Hayden Fleury more down the stretch? Yes. But I would also say, and again, no fault to Hayden, but when he got hurt on December 23rd, it took him some time to get back up to speed. And when that didn't happen, it kind of lined up to where the Jets were really leaning in on playing Logan Stanley. But again, my counter to what you just said, and I'm not debating it, Sean, but what I would say is that based on how Hayden Fleury played in Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues when the Jets had 5 defensemen, and how he played for the majority of the series against Dallas, I think they have a strong enough body of work to know that he can handle the job.
Well, okay. All right.
Well, I mean, he played 33 minutes. He played 33 minutes in Game 7. I mean, that
I'm just saying he played 33
to
minutes in a game. Like the trick with the NHL, and maybe the trick with him is, like we've seen from him in the past, and one of the reasons he's moved around the league and started off as a high-end prospect, and has kind of tailed off a little bit. I mean, it's like a backup goaltender, or it's like a rookie coming up in the playoffs, like the Lonnie Bahanis effect. I mean, looks like a god at one point and then ends up playing for the Manitoba Moose years after that, right? Like the key is showing that you, and so here, this is not me saying I don't think Fleury can do it. This is me saying the Winnipeg Jets as an organization have put themselves in a position where if they were to do what you're suggesting, sign them up, get them in the third pairing and run them in the third pairing, they've missed an opportunity this year with how much they've run Logan Stanley and how much, they had Dylan Coughlin in there and Miller and so on and so forth. And even at times, Ville Heinola, they've missed out on an opportunity to see what a full season of that player looks like, and him being that full-time solution. And which to me makes it hard for them to say, we're not going to go with the carousel that we went in that third pairing. We're going to go, he's won done that job. We're confident in that, because they didn't give him enough time to show that, or enough of a runway to show that. I agree with you 100%. I think by the end, it was obvious that he was the selection to go into that role in the playoffs. Shooting stars burn bright, and then you don't know what happens after that. And that's all I'm saying, is they've left the question mark on the table as a management organization by not figuring that out earlier and giving us a long runway of seeing what he looked like in their lineup. Back when, Ken, earlier in the year, he got put in that role, and you were on this podcast talking about how much you loved him in that role. It would have been nice to see him from that point on, and what he brought to the Jets over the entirety of the season. We know he can do it in short spurts. The question that they may not know, although maybe they've seen enough, and maybe that question is answered. I'm just saying, I think that that's a risk that has to be taken. Do I think he could overcome that risk? I personally do, Ken, but they've left the question mark in that in
totally
his
fair. Totally fair. But I mean, the other thing too is that Luke Shen wasn't here for the majority of the year, and they did barely play together at all. He looks
like everywhere else.
I'm saying that Fleury as a partner to Shen, I think works really well moving.
I agree
forward.
100%. It sounded like I was going to go in a different direction, and then
I know what you're saying.
Me right back. You got me going.
Stay
in the
with
right
me.
direction.
Stay with me.
Thank you.
Again, he's not a perfect player. He's not a perfect player, but he had very few players that are 6'4" skate the way that Hayden does, and I think that he got his confidence on the physical side of things too. I mean, were there some mistakes over the course of the year? Yes, but all players make mistakes, and I think that it shouldn't be a difficult player to sign, and I think that he can help the Jets moving forward. But again, for him, there are already 8 players signed on the Jets blue line.
Yeah.
We're going to have to see how the negotiation goes.
Yeah. Okay. Josh Morrissey came out, told us the news that had the Jets moved on, he was probably gone for the rest of the playoffs. It's a knee issue. Doesn't require surgery, which sure sounds a lot like a strained ligament in the knee, is sure what it sounds like. Although, I mean, that's Dr. Renny, that don't take that to the bank. I mean, I guess it could be maybe, I don't know, something wrong with his patella. It could be something wrong with his patellar tendon. I don't know. Maybe you can tear a tendon and not necessarily require surgery, but need the time for it to fix. So regardless, something's going on with his knee. He would have been out for the entirety of the playoffs. Also learned that he was in concussion protocol after Game 7, which is pretty interesting, Ken, because you and I had a journalism conversation where, do you mind me sharing this with the Morrissey thing?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, I had kind of called out Ken for a tweet that he'd put out about Josh Morrissey leaving the game with a concussion or concussion-like symptoms or something like that. And I'd said journalistically, and I still do stand by this, journalistically at that moment, you can't know if that's true or not. So it can be potentially irresponsible to share that. And a look at the replay, it looks like there's no head contact, and it's maybe more arm or shoulder related. In the end, Ken was 100% right. I still do think the cautionary tale there is something to be weighed in on, but long story short, Ken was right in that situation in what he tweeted. Josh Morrissey touched a lot on Mark Scheifele. You can go in that direction. I think we've talked a lot about, and I think people just understand the relationship between players who love each other and are there for each other. I don't know unless there's things that you feel are uncovered, Ken, you can touch on that. I think the more kind of pressing things are what Josh Morrissey's reaction is to how this season and how he perceived this season compared to last season, and maybe how he feels that sets this team up for the future. Take it away, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, and just so folks have the context, I mean, the reason why I thought it was a concussion wasn't necessarily because of the head contact. It was because he was pulled from the game at that time. It wasn't, I watched the entire series here. He went to the bench, he played another shift, and then someone tapped him and said, you got to go to the back. So it wasn't the trainer saying you should go to the back and get checked out. This was a scenario where he was pulled off the ice. So generally when that's happened, it's to be in concussion protocol. But then, Sean, you and I spent the entire intermission looking for the head contact that
wasn't there.
It wasn't there in an angle that we saw, but it must have been there at some point, because
his reaction was definitely the reaction. The way he turned his head, reaction was that of someone who had head
elbow to the chin, right? I mean,
we never saw it though. Just in many looks. Yeah.
So anyways, and then to see the play where it looked like he separated his shoulder on the hit on Matthew Joseph. I mean, that could have caused some whiplash or jarring or whatever else also. But yeah, I mean, I just thought, I mean, Josh spoke for almost 12 minutes, Sean, and it's among, for folks who haven't seen it, it is among the most heartfelt stuff you can ever see. I mean, this is literally a person bearing his soul and sharing his deepest thoughts. And, as much strength and grace as Josh showed at the time after his own father, Tom's passing, it was equal. There were equal amounts of grace, if that's even possible. I mean, we praised Adam Lowry for his leadership and his ability to handle that entire day on Saturday. That Josh was there for Mark Scheifele when he came off the ice, Sean, and that he was there to have Mark, pull into an embrace, knowing what he was going through, that he could, share some levity in the situation today with us, saying, sharing some of the texts from his own mother saying that, Kyle Connor's dad, his dad, and Brad were, up there watching the game on the big screen. Image. I mean, just Sean, we're part of the club that Josh referenced, and as we've talked about, it is the club no one wants to be part of, but it is a club that its best and most endearing quality is the support network that is surrounded within it. And
1,000% agree.
What we're seeing from the hockey world in these last few days, whether it's Paul Maurice or Brad Marchand or anyone who has spoken, it's impressive what the Jets have done themselves. What you're seeing around the league is an incredible sign of just humanity, and that to me again. And Josh sort of embodies all of those things, and I thought that was very impressive. And in terms of the steps forward that the team has taken, I think Josh was the guy who poured his heart out last year after Game 5, saying he didn't want to feel this way again. He wanted his teammates to remember the feeling and go home and be hungry. And I saw a lot, again, as emotionally taxing as this last 48 hours have been, Sean, Josh Morrissey has not lost sight of the fact that, to get your name engraved on the cup, the Jets need to get even better. He talked about how Scott O'Neill pushed this group, how they want it to be pushed, how they need to be pushed further, because ultimately their goal was not reached. So as close as they were to the Dallas Stars, they're not just happy. This isn't just we're happy to be their moment for this group. They know that the ability to win is within the first, let's say 3 or 4 years of the window and the contracts. And one of those years has just been eliminated. So I like the urgency that I heard in his voice. And what we know about Josh is what we've seen since he was drafted in the first round of 2013, Sean. This is a guy who is not happy with the status quo. He wants to get better. He will find a way to make himself better, and he wants his teammates to do that as well, so that the team gets better and does take another personal step forward as a group.
I think you've touched off, Josh. We'll move off that, but if people saw me kind of losing my mind pointing at a comment by waiters who said people don't know who the GM checked in on. The one thing that I'll share this quickly because we're not going to touch on it. We're going to touch on it on the GM show, which will be Thursday. I get so many things from people saying Chevy needed to be more creative. Chevy put all his eggs in one basket, all these kind of things. And I'm just going to hint right off the bat. If you think that Kevin Cheveldayoff went out and was it's Brock Nelson or nothing and never made another phone call or never went down the road on other guys, you're dead wrong. Let's just put it like that. If you really think that Kevin Cheveldayoff was just tried one thing and was okay, I'm out, that's dead wrong. And the whole idea of needing to get creative, I can't tell you how many times people have messaged me and been Chevy, I mean, what's wrong with this guy? I would make a package for this guy right now. And that guy was not available. And so the person is sitting there messaging me to criticize Chevy for not making a deal for a player that I or you or someone else, around the league knows was not available. And what wasted energy that is to be my goodness, Kevin Cheveldayoff, why didn't he trade for this guy that in reality is not available. I mean, that's the thing is sometimes, and we're seeing it happen a ton in the chat room here. And hey, T. Will is going down the road on mocking the idea that players weren't available. Ken, I talked about it to you endlessly this year and talked about it on this podcast heading into it, how this year was shaping up to be a really, really strange, weird year, and that I didn't think what the Jets needed was going to be available at the trade deadline, or that the competition for the very scant resources that would be there was going to be insane. Why? Too many teams were involved right down to the wire, so they weren't selling. A lot of teams, aka the Buffalo Sabres or other teams like that, were not in a position to take good players, send them down the road so that their fans were like, what? We're kicking the can down the road. There was, in my opinion, this was the year where there was the least amount of sellers, and then you have to pick through those sellers that are there, and you have to hope that the players who are on that team don't have trade protection. If they do, you have to hope that they're willing to come. So just let's lay that out. That will set the table for the conversation that will happen. But boy, oh boy, sitting there and ripping into a guy for not getting a player that was not going anywhere or was not going to be available, to me is just wasted energy. And I'm seeing a lot of wasted energy out there. Okay, Ken, moving into Kyle Connor, and then I want to end on Hellebuyck. I thought it was the most fascinating Connor Hellebuyck conversation or a conversation we've ever had with Connor Hellebuyck before, so I want to end on that. But Kyle Connor, I just wanted your takeaways on his avail.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I thought that his, bluntness, that him using the word failure was interesting. I mean, this is a guy who's super encouraged. I think that he was asked about his future, Sean. I mean, Kelly Moore asked him about, seeing his longtime line mate extend, seeing Connor Hellebuyck, his buddy, extend. I mean, how does that fit for him when he's available for an extension on July 1st? Kyle, with the usual Kyle Connor comment, and I mean this in a positive way. Not a lot of stuff bothers me. So a contract being in the last year of his contract, if he doesn't extend before that, will not bother him one bit. These things will take care of themselves. And I agree with him. I imagine this is a top priority for the Jets. I mean, what the number looks like, we'll get into that down the road. It's probably going to be north of what Mark and Connor Hellebuyck signed for, but with this cap going up. But again, that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
And people can say whatever they want, but Kyle Connor currently sits third in NHL playoff scoring. Now, did it help that he played 13 games? Sure. But he's over a point a game player for the people saying Kyle doesn't produce when it matters. Those people also need a pristine roofing wake up call, because it's simply not accurate. Kyle has been productive in the playoffs, and he was productive again these playoffs, and he remains their most dangerous goal scoring threat. So with the potential of Ehlers walking, I don't think the Jets are going to be risking losing Kyle Connor 1 year after, if Ehlers does in fact move on to other places. So I mean, I thought that he handled everything very well. Like I said, Kyle, as a new dad, I think this guy, you saw a lot of empathy from him when he talked about Mark Scheifele. No surprise, given what he went through personally. I thought he had a great year. He got it's his best year ever. He's getting better as a two-way player. Was used on the penalty kill at times also. And I saw a lot of backtracking from Kyle Connor and effort. And I see a guy who's very driven to get his own name on the Stanley Cup and knows what is required to do so in terms of continuing to get better. That's about it for me on Kyle.
Well covered. And I'm going to start with the devil's advocate side of this, and I'm going to end on something that is I'm going to end on the payoff, the Cambrian Credit Union payoff. The one thing about Kyle Connor that I find is a fascinating thing to look at here is Kyle Connor has rode shotgun on a line with Mark Scheifele basically since he got into the league, right? Kyle Connor watched as Blake Wheeler was a player that we talked about as being that guy who just found a way to beat father time, right? He was in his 30s. He was getting better. just seemed to be increasing his value as a player. The older that he got at a time where a lot of players were dropping off. I've said this before. I mean, you take a look at where Mark Scheifele is right now. Tyler Seguin's a year older, and a lot of folks out there will take a look and say, hey, Tyler Seguin's best days are not just behind him, they're well behind him, is what a lot of people will say. Blake Wheeler wasn't that guy, and one of the things we used to explain it is he's played 4 years of college, so maybe there wasn't as much wear and tear on his body and all these things. But when it came for Blake Wheeler, when Father Time came, he came, and he came right quick, okay? And Kyle Connor watched that, and he saw that. Kyle Connor has one more year on his contract with the Winnipeg Jets, and if he extends, it's probably one of these, what's the advantage that you have as the team that the player is currently with? Well, you can go 8 years. So Kyle Connor is 28 this year, means he could lock down at 29 for an extension with the Winnipeg Jets, which would take him to 37 with the Winnipeg Jets. Mark Scheifele is 32, so 4-year difference between those two players, which means Kyle Connor, when he turns 37 in the last year of his contract, Mark Scheifele would be 41, and I would expect out of the league. There's guys who beat that. Corey Perry is showing right now. Keep in mind, former Hart Trophy winner in Corey Perry, who reinvented himself a number of years ago and has been that guy that you're seeing from him right now in Edmonton for a long time now, back to his time with the Dallas Stars, if you think about it that way. I'm interested in the idea that Kyle Connor has seen what it looks like to see Blake Wheeler get caught by Father Time, how quickly it happens when it does happen, and what that looks like when you are basically, now, if you are Mark Scheifele, you broke in with Blake Wheeler and you had this great running mate, right? That allowed you to become the best version of yourself. And you followed that and you followed that and you followed that. What Mark Scheifele had that was brilliant for him was, as Blake Wheeler aged out, Kyle Connor aged in. So Mark Scheifele is going to have had over his career the perfect scenario by which you came into the league and you had a guy who was in his prime and kept growing in his prime, and you kind of rode in his wake for a while until you caught up to him and passed him. And Kyle Connor, I believe, has had the same thing with Mark Scheifele and with Blake Wheeler for a while, past Blake Wheeler. And now in that little boat race that I am just building in visually in your mind, has probably got to a point where he's at, or maybe even surpassed Mark Scheifele in that situation. Having watched the tail off of a player who was brilliant in his early 30s, who just kept getting better in his early 30s. Sound familiar, folks? I wonder what the mindset is of a guy and what Kyle Connor would look at the future of the Winnipeg Jets as being like if there's the very distinct possibility of Mark Scheifele tailing off over the next 3 years comes in. Does Gabe Vilardi, if they can keep him and extend him, which I expect to happen, do you feel there's enough there to move on? Because if Mark Scheifele goes, who's that center that you continue on in your career? That's not apparent. And it doesn't look like it's in the hopper, unless you believe Braden Yeager is going to be that guy, or unless you believe that Brad Lambert is going to be that guy. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you think that, I'm telling you that you take Mark Scheifele at the same age, and there are no signs or suggestions that that's going to be the case. Kyle Connor's a smart guy. He's looking at his future, and I don't think there's any scenario by which Kyle Connor isn't looking at what I'm looking at. What does the future look like? When does Mark Scheifele tail off? What does my future look like? Where does that replacement center come from? If he does come on a team that has had a hard time filling the 2C role for 4 or 5 years, the way that the Winnipeg Jets have, I wonder how it has an effect on his belief in the Winnipeg Jets, or his belief in his place on the Winnipeg Jets. Now, I said I was going to end in a different way, and I'll say it like this. Kyle Connor did not sound at all to me like a guy whose thoughts were anywhere but in Winnipeg. I think one of the things that has paid off time and time again for the Winnipeg Jets is the idea that with their very best core players, Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele being perfect examples, that this is their team. And not a lot of players get to say that. Not a lot of players get to say, I am a organization in the NHL. I am the Winnipeg Jets. And I am the Winnipeg Jets because they have made me that. They've given me the keys to the team. They very much are already planning out my statue outside the building if I can do special things. So I believe personally that's going to pay off for the Winnipeg Jets, and that they are going to re-sign and extend Kyle Connor down the stretch here. That's my belief in their payoff. And hey, if you are looking for a payoff or to pay off high interest credit cards or debt, we suggest you go talk to our friends at Cambrian Credit Union about their payoff loan. They can show you how taking out a loan to pay off your debt actually gets you debt free faster, and you can save thousands of dollars. Go to cambrian.mb.ca to book an appointment online. I say that, I believe it will pay off, but Ken, boy, oh boy, I can't imagine for a second that Kyle Connor doesn't take a look at this and think to himself, if you're Mark Scheifele, you signed and you extended with the Winnipeg Jets because it looks like Kyle Connor is going to be with you for a long time, and you get your running mate to pass that puck to for years and years and years. It looks like a different situation to me for Kyle Connor and his future.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to look at things like that on the big picture. I would just counter that I think Kyle works with Mark every day, and I think that, Blake Wheeler worked incredibly hard to be at the top of his game. No doubt about that. No one's questioning that. Mark Scheifele has done that for a long, long time. It's up to him to show that longer term. I also see Kyle extending, for a number of reasons. Enjoys it here. Family enjoys it here. He's grown as an individual, matured as a person and as a player. I think he wants to win a Stanley Cup here. Now, does that mean he wouldn't have interest? Of course he'd have interest if he ever got to the open market. But, again, Kyle's experience at the Four Nations, again, and I am on record as saying I don't think the coaching staff handled him particularly well. Kyle needed to play better. That is also true. But again, he and Mark have been joined at the hip for a good chunk of time. But I think also, too, people forget the amount of time that Pierre-Luc Dubois played with Kyle Connor, and Kyle was equally productive when he was playing similarly productive, not equally because this year he had a career year, but he still has shown he can be a productive player. And I don't think this is a scenario where if Kyle Connor goes somewhere else, he's not going to produce. But he also has produced exceptionally well with Mark Scheifele over the course of his career. And I think that obviously counts for something. It's not the be all and end all, but I think that those two guys, much like, Josh Morrissey's future has been aligned with Mark Scheifele. Those two are best friends. Kyle Connor is very close. Same with Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, he had a chance to play with his Michigan buddies at the Four Nations at Team USA, and he will get to do that at the Olympics as well. But I do think that Kyle will be the next player to extend, and it's going to be a big number. But is it a guarantee? Am I out here saying there's no other scenario? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if we're taking receipts, I'm with you. I expect Kyle Connor to extend with the Winnipeg Jets, but I also expect Kyle Connor to get paid and for it to be worth his while to stick around with the Winnipeg Jets.
Okay, let's move on to Hellebuyck, and I'm just going to let you take away your.
Oh, you dive in. That's good. You go.
No, it's okay. You start out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Connor, we've seen Connor, have a couple of sessions that were, part venting, part, I thought we saw a lot of blunt force honesty from Connor Hellebuyck in these playoffs. I saw someone who is very motivated still. Our photographer, Ruth Bonneville was looking for a shot of Hellebuyck as he came into the room. And Sean, it's so perfect. I mean, Connor was working by the stick rack, and the Jets have the picture of the trophy going out on their doors to the ice. And like, what encapsulates the chase for Connor Hellebuyck more than that picture of the Stanley Cup, like within his grasp, but he hasn't been able to take it yet. Right. I mean, that to me was sort of a kind of a fitting image as we spent some time talking to players about the future. And, super interesting. I mean, Connor was pretty deep, there were a lot of deep thoughts, and, you had a good follow-up to him, based on where his language was going. I'm with you. Based on what Connor was saying, I thought it was a pretty good question to say, well, did you land on playoff goaltending is different than regular season goaltending? And,
yeah.
You can take that portion of it. But, again, I just thought that we talked about this at the end of the last show. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck needed to be better in the playoffs. He was. I mean, did he solve all of his issues in one time? No. I mean, he's still got to get rid of that road woes piece, but there were not road woes in the last 2 road starts. Yes, 1 goal he would like to have back for sure, but I think Connor Hellebuyck is not going to be, chasing around demons next year. I think we saw what Connor Hellebuyck did last year when he had a playoff that ended prematurely. He came back and played the type of hockey that will earn him a 3rd Vezina and has him in serious consideration for first place on the Hart Trophy ballots. So I expect him to go home with hunger. I'll be curious to see. I mean, I asked him flat out about workload. He thought it was great. It's not about games played. It's about when he gets his rest. So, the one thing I would say, I would not be surprised if there will be a minor reduction in his starts, Sean. And we know he won't have those extra 3 high pressure Four Nations face-off starts, which again, you can count whatever, are those worth 1.5? Are those worth 2? Whatever it is. But I don't think we'll see Connor Hellebuyck at 65 starts next year and then 13 more in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, Sean. If the Jets are to reach their goal, the Jets needed another 13 or 14, 12 to 13 starts from Hellebuyck also. So I'm not saying it's going to be 55, but I would not be surprised if it's in that 58, 59, 60 range for next year.
I'm going to
Depending
tell
on how the
you.
schedule looks. Sorry, I shouldn't say this. There's Olympics next year.
Of
So
course.
there's going to be high volume there. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be more in the 55 to 58 range.
Yeah. Let me just say, this is what Renny heard when Connor Hellebuyck was talking. And let me couch this first by saying, typically Renny hears what Renny wants to hear. And yes, Ken, I agree. My headband looks smashing right now. I heard him say he needed to move on from the idea of perfection in the playoffs.
Sure, good, well put.
He got to a place where like the way I viewed Connor Hellebuyck, and I viewed him like this for a long time, and people will this should remind you of what I said on the show last year when he went out of the playoffs, where I never liked I like my game. I think my game's great. I think because there were clearly different results in the playoffs compared to what he was getting in the regular season. And I thought that now there's no way Connor Hellebuyck was saying this, but it's hard for me as a journalist who's deducing facts to take him saying, I like my game. I couldn't have been any better. Everything was fine. And him allowing 6 goals, however many goals, getting lit up the way that he did last year is anything other than, what do you want me to do? Let's ask the rest of my team around me. And there was something that he said, I can't remember the quote, but there was a quote that he said, and it must have come out sounding like that. It couldn't be me, the only one walking away with that, because Adam Lowry took exception to it, and then Connor Hellebuyck backtracked on it afterwards. But we stopped hearing that this year. We stopped hearing I liked my game, everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. And I've thought this in the past before. Connor Hellebuyck is a goaltender who I think just created around him this steel box that inside of that he did not allow bad thoughts to enter. And so one of the things he didn't do was talk to us in the playoffs, because it's hard not to let bad thoughts enter when a guy like Renny or a guy like Kenny is asking you about the 7 goals that you allowed last night, or getting pulled 3 times in a series against the St. Louis Blues. So no, keep those thoughts out. I'm living in this rosy, sunny world where everything's perfect and I'm confident and everything's fine. And yeah, I let in 6 goals. I liked my game. It wasn't my fault. 6 lucky things happened in consecutive fashion that ended up in the puck, ending up in the back of the net. There's nothing more I could have done. When he talked about, and it wasn't the words that he used, but this is what I heard, Ken, the idea of abandoning perfection. I think that steel box took Connor Hellebuyck to being the best goaltender in the world. And here's one of the things that I think are so hard about the duality of sports, but the duality of psychology, but the duality of life in general. Sometimes the very thing that can take you extremely high can also be the thing that keeps you from going any higher. So that idea of Connor Hellebuyck always liking his game and always being positive and everything like that, I think took him to a point that he was, a Vezina caliber goaltender during the regular season. It was stopping him from learning in the playoffs. What's this thing that we always say? Losing is learning. If in your head you never lose, I liked my game. Wasn't my fault. Something else was happening. There's never a look at what can happen. And Connor Hellebuyck, I thought, was really blunt when he basically said there was a huge load taken off my shoulders when we made the second round. I thought, Ken, he essentially basically admitted that his team got to the second round in spite of him. And once that happened, there was a realization there that, listen, I wasn't perfect and we made it. There's a lesson in that. I was not perfect. And I know I wasn't perfect. I'm introspective and realize I wasn't perfect. And we still made it. So in spite of me not being the perfect image that I want to see in my head, we got the results we needed. And because of that, maybe I can explore the idea of things, the puck ends up in the back of the net or you don't stop. Maybe it's not about what did I need it to do to stop that puck. Maybe it's about that puck got by me. What am I going to do now? What do I do next? Oh, we got through that series. How do I respond? I think we saw Connor Hellebuyck respond in a way that I still say it in a time where they're like, was Jake Ottinger the better goaltender in the second round series? You're damn right he was. If you're contesting that, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Ottinger was brilliant in that series. And yes, that rebound that Connor Hellebuyck gives up in game 6 is a mistake in a game where basically 2 mistakes cost the Jets the game, and that's him spitting out that rebound, and it's Mark Scheifele putting the puck into Sam Steele's shin pads, and that's enough. That's enough in the playoffs for you to go. I still believe that Connor Hellebuyck got to a place where accepting that he had demons in opening the closet and seeing the monster in there and saying, man, you've been giving me a hard time for a lot of years. I need to figure out how to live with you. That's better than keeping the closet closed, hearing the claws scratching on the other side of the door and saying, everything's fine, right? I think that Connor Hellebuyck is facing demons that he's refused to face because in the past, not facing those demons has led to success. And he's exploring the idea now that facing them can lead to even further success. And that's what he's looking for. He said it for a long time, Ken. All that matters to him is the Stanley Cup. And I think the pursuit that he's on right now is more likely to lead him to that goal than what we've seen from him in the past. And just one last thing before we move on, I thought he said something that was extremely wise when you asked him, what do you do or how do you go about getting those next 10 wins? I'm going to, again, kind of try and refine the answer that he gave, but he basically said, keep doing what we are doing. I think that is brilliant because there's so many players, I think, that are on the right track and go off the right track because they didn't get the result they want and think they need to change. I would say it like this, Ken, and it's what I said in my breakdown on Sportsnet. Just because the path you are on didn't result in you getting to the destination you wanted to get to does not mean it's the wrong path. Maybe that path just gets you where you want to go next year or the year after or the year after. I think it shows a high degree of confidence and a high degree of maturity for Connor Hellebuyck and the Winnipeg Jets to say, we're on the right path. Just keep doing what we're doing. And I think we can get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, well said. And I think that too, there was not false bravado with Hellebuyck today. And just Sean, to your point, Jake Ottinger was the second best goalie against Stu Skinner last Western Conference Finals. So we talk about scar tissue. That is Jake Ottinger applying scar tissue and going up against the guy who has the job that he wants as the number one guy for Team USA. So, I think that Connor Hellebuyck took an important step forward in these playoffs. And I think he'll be more ready. And that's what he said. I mean, he's going to be building for next year's game 1. Now, that's not to say he plans on taking the season off and just getting ready for the playoffs. But, this is a guy who wants to get the job done when it matters most. And again, for all the folks who are saying, oh, Hellebuyck's proven he can't do it. I mean, Bobrovsky is still getting the job done. But for a long time, people thought that Sergei Bobrovsky could not get the job done at the playoff time. And he's telling those people that they can pound sand these days as he's getting ready for another or third consecutive Eastern Conference final. So, yeah, I mean, I liked what I heard from Connor Hellebuyck. There was an intensity to his voice There's lots of unfinished business, whatever way you wanted to discuss it. But again, I like the tone and what he said. I thought was important. And this is simple. We know what Connor's ultimate goal is, and he wants to be a lifelong Jet. I don't think it was an accident. He was, one of the people sporting Jets gear today. Had the retro starter jacket on today.
Yeah.
Again, we're not here for our sartorial commentary, but Appleton wearing a WPG hat, Hellebuyck wearing the Jets jacket. I mean, again, I don't think these are accidental things. Just like I didn't think it was an accident that Josh walked in with Mark Scheifele in a show of support on Saturday as he made his way off the bus. And Josh, basically had said that to us today. So, I liked what I heard. Hellebuyck, kind of wrapping things up. I thought he did an excellent job of, kind of encapsulating everything. And again, I think we've seen a humility from Connor that is pretty endearing in terms of how he's shown his human side a lot during these playoffs. And again, he's already one of the most popular Jets, if not the most popular Jet already. I think that portion of things, and again, we know Connor doesn't love to do media, and that's okay. But I think what we've seen and heard from him isn't. You don't agree?
Well, clearly I agree based on everything that he's ever done before this. Do you feel like maybe like as he's gone through the fire here and walked out and talked to the media and like talked to us today, do you think maybe he's slightly softening on that and being like, rather than try, like, because I think one of the reasons he doesn't like talking to the media is because of exactly what I talked about. He's got this steel trap. Don't let any bad thoughts in, and us asking questions about failure is letting bad thoughts in. So if you get to a point where you're actually now for the first time accepting of bad thoughts and how to handle those, then maybe the media, maybe we're part of the monster in the closet that's been scratching on the door, that now he's opened up and said, hey, I know I haven't liked you too much in the past. I may not like you too much, but I think I can abide you a little more. Do you think maybe he's at the point where he can abide us a little more?
Personally, I think it's a stretch, Sean. No, sorry. Let's just put it this way. The fact that Dustin Byfuglien is one of the people that has been on his mask previously,
yes,
I think Connor would prefer to remain in Dustin Byfuglien mode and speaking very limited to us. And that's okay too. I mean, that's not part of everyone's personality. He enjoys playing under the spotlight, but he doesn't seek the spotlight, and that's okay. But I mean, I like the fact that he is out there showing a lot of accountability, and that's where I also saw was part of his growth, because I think he is a big part of, he's a foundational piece of this franchise. He has used the words, lifelong. I want to play for this organization for my entire career, and that in a part of that job is speaking to us, whether guys particularly like it or not.
You had talked about accountability. I just wanted to point this out. I keep forgetting to do it, but I can't remember. It was someone who comes on here quite often, but was just absolutely torching me 2 games into the playoffs for my Edmonton Oilers to the Cup pick. And speaking of accountability, it's been good to see them come back. And, like when you call someone out for their takes, like the thing to do, the noble thing to do is to come back and be like, boy, I said terrible things about that person. Now it turns out they're right. So I'm going to come and I'm going to own that. And it's been great to see them do that and come here, because everyone's seen them in the chat room trying to make things right after doing that. Because the last thing anyone in this chat room would ever do is call us out on bad takes, be proven wrong, Ken, and come back and hold themselves accountable for that. Because that would never happen in our chat. Our chat room is too good for that, Ken. Our chat room is too good for that type of behavior.
Well, hey, we talk about receipts. Hey, I called the Jets to win the Cup, and I abandoned my preseason pick of the Dallas Stars, and look where that's got me.
Look at you. Hey, see, you didn't keep faith. Like Renny, Renny always keeps faith. People always try to get me to bend on it. I won't do it.
Yeah, well done. So this round, speaking of the record, we have 2 series left. I was 1-3 last round. That gets me to 7-5 after 6-2. I will go Stars in 6. And Panthers in 6 also.
I'm going to go Oilers.
I know where you're going. Yes.
5.
Whoa!
Oilers in 5, and I'm going to go Panthers in. God, I want to go 5 as well. I feel like that. Boy, 2006, Ken, I was in a hockey pool and I went heavy on the Ducks and the Sharks, and the Oilers went and blew them up. And then I went heavy on the Buffalo Sabres, who lost in the conference final to the Carolina Hurricanes. And I was up by a ridiculous amount of points, but the second place guy had Stahl, and Stahl, with the empty netter in Game 7, won the draft for that player. I had the nightmares of that. It reminds me of that year not believing in the Carolina Hurricanes as much as I should have, and I feel like I've been burnt on that because I, like you, had I had Dallas right. I had Toronto. Sorry, I had Dallas right. I had Edmonton right. I had Toronto wrong, and I had Washington wrong. I feel like I'm going to get myself burnt by Carolina by saying this, but I too think that it's going to be the Florida Panthers. So I think it's going to be a rematch of last year as well. So that's Kenny and Rennie's pick, and I think that it's going to be the Florida Panthers in 5 as well. That would get me home for a little bit of time, which would be nice. Just some business here. Johnson Group got you covered. I'm going to give it to my camera guy, Colin, who has been phenomenal all year. Really appreciate him and everything he does. He puts up with a lot, folks. He puts up with Renny probably more than anyone in this chat room has to, maybe even more than Ken has to. So Colin Jensen, I appreciate you, my friend. Great job. And we'll give the Johnson Group got you covered to Mike McIntyre as well, Ken's running mate to a degree in when he's away from this running mate, working with the Free Press. Thank you. And they definitely embody the Johnson Group Got You Covered award. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? Look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. And we want to hand out our last and final keg save of the game from our last show. And the winner of that is going to be Terry. Ken, I know in your head you're thinking this. You had it right. I'd written them in. That's where I'd heard them.
Yes,
before.
I did.
Terry, you are the winner of the keg, Terri. I saw them in the chat room here earlier on. You're the winner of the keg save of the game. And you know what that means. It means send me your email, send me your full name, and I will have the fine folks at the keg send you a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. And our last lamplighter winner, that would be binaural. Binaural, you know what that means. You have been entered, and on the next show, I will announce the winner of the, because binaural needs some time to get a hold of me. You have been entered to win a Frosty Delicious 15-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale, brought to you by our friends at TransCanada Brewing Company. Also a Lamplighter hoodie and one of their great pizzas down there. So you know what to do, binaural. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email. You'll be entered to win that prize pack that I'm talking about, which we will announce on our next show, which will be Thursday. And just a reminder for all of the folks, 11290 Kenniston is where we are going to have the Kenny and Renny year-ender, where we sender. We will have a date for you on Thursday. We are hacking it out and arguing over it right now. But we will announce that. People have been, I mean, it's going to be a sellout. I can tell you that right now. If you still want to come, make sure you send me your information as quick as possible. That gets you on the list earlier. There's no more time to waste. If you've been sitting back and thinking maybe you should go or not to go, get a hold of me right now. It's the only way I can guarantee you're going to get into the party, folks. Okay, that's it for us. Anything to say before we go, Ken?
No, thanks for folks for coming for the pop-up Thursday, 3:00. Join us again, and we'll fire it up again.
All right. This has been a long one, but I think we got it covered, and a lot of things that needed to be said. And there's going to be more things that need to be said on Thursday, folks. So make sure you join us at 3:00. It's going to be great. Thank you for joining us this time around. I will talk to you from Dallas on Thursday. Ken from right here in Winnipeg, maybe even the golf course. I don't know. Maybe he'll just like golf and have one of those things where it's like, locked on his face the whole time, and you can watch him celebrate his 6th or 7th, whatever it is, hole in one that he's got at this point. It's sickening, folks. It's absolutely sickening. What won't be sickening is our show on Thursday. We can't wait to see you then. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.